Bonjour à tous, welcome you all. Je vous accueille avec plaisir pour cette troisième séance du séminaire Paris-Cambridge, séminaire qui a pour but de faire échanger nos deux écoles de recherche, nos deux écoles de pensée à travers une série de dialogues épistémologiques. I'm extremely glad to welcome you all for this third session of this Paris-Cambridge seminar, the aim of which is to make our two schools exchange through a series of epistemological dialogues. We have had the opportunity to explore the themes of data and big data with Fiona Kidea and Enrico Crema in Cambridge, and then material culture here with Boris Valentin and John Robb. Nous avons déjà abordé les thèmes des données et des big data avec Fiona Kidea et Enrico Crema, puis de la culture matérielle avec John Robb et Boris Valentin. Aujourd'hui, nous abordons une question essentielle, c'est-à-dire qui a trait à l'essence même de notre discipline, c'est qu'est-ce que la préhistoire ? Question simple mais complexe à la fois, une discipline autonome ou une discipline au sein de l'archéologie. Archéologie caractérisée elle-même par le fait qu'elle emploie à peu près toutes les autres disciplines pour élaborer son discours. Today we are going to investigate the essential question, what is prehistory? When the most characteristic feature of archaeology is that it uses almost all other disciplines to build its own narratives. Alors, ce séminaire, il est nouveau dans la forme et il se ravive une tradition d'échange bien entamée avant le spectre du Brexit. Françoise Audouz, ici présente, me rappelait avoir pris part elle-même à un séminaire parisien-Cambridge organisé par Sander van der Leu à Cambridge, aux côtés de Jean-Paul Demoule, Annie Coudard, Serge Clouziou et Pierre Lemonnier. This seminar is reviving a tradition of exchanges, among which we can cite the Cambridge Parisien Seminar exchange organized by Sander van der Leu with many archaeologists and anthropologists, including Françoise Audouz, Jean-Paul Demoule, Annie Coudard, Serge Clouziou and Pierre Lemonnier. Alors aujourd'hui, nous avons l'honneur d'accueillir trois intervenants de poids, mais avant de les présenter, je veux remercier toutes les institutions et personnes qui nous permettent d'être là aujourd'hui. I want to express sincere thanks to people and institutions who made this seminar become possible. L'Union européenne dans le cadre des programmes H2020, the European Union under the program H2020, le McDonald Institute for Archaeological Research, l'équipe The Research Team Ethnologie Préhistorique, numéro 7041 du CNRS, qui organise ce séminaire, et en particulier Pierre Baudu, Ludovic Mével et Michel Ballinger, qui n'ont pas compté leur temps, surtout pour l'organisation administrative du séminaire, qui n'a pas été simple, qui a causé quelques arrachages de cheveux, mais pour un résultat qui valait le coup. François Villeneuve, directeur de l'UMR, Sandrine Jean-Baptiste Bolo, Vanessa Tubiana et Mourad Besbès, qui ont aussi donné un temps considérable pour l'organisation. But most of all, my warmest thanks go to our speakers today. Mes remerciements les plus chaleureux vont aussi avant tout à nos trois intervenants aujourd'hui. We have the enormous chance to welcome Professor Graeme Barker. Nous accueillons aujourd'hui le professeur Graeme Barker, successeur de Colin Renfrew à la prestigieuse chaire Disney d'archéologie à Cambridge. Il a commencé sa carrière comme maître de conférence à l'université de Sheffield, nommé ensuite directeur de la British School de Rome, avant de devenir le patron de l'archéologie à Cambridge de 2004 à 2014. Alors, sa présentation vous fera découvrir l'étendue de ses travaux, qui lui ont valu d'être élu fellow de la British Academy, lauréat du prix d'Anne David, entre autres, et plus récemment élevé au rang de chevalier de l'Empire britannique par la reine d'Angleterre elle-même. Alors, à côté de ce tableau impressionnant, Graeme Barker, c'est surtout un chercheur à l'enthousiasme simple et contagieux. Une de ces personnalités rares qui montre qu'on peut prendre l'archéologie au sérieux sans se prendre au sérieux. I've just said a few words about a few facts of your life, but you have understood everything, so I won't translate. Il ne fallait pas moins que l'expérience de Sophie Archambault de Beaune pour l'intervention miroir. Bonjour. Professeur de préhistoire à l'université Jean Moulin Lyon 3, après un parcours à Paris.1 et Paris.10, puis des responsabilités à direction scientifique de l'INSHS, Sophie de Beaune est une chercheuse très impliquée dans ses enseignements, non seulement à Lyon 3, mais aussi qui l'ont menée aussi à Lyon 2, au CNAM, à l'EHESS, entre autres. Membre de l'équipe Ethnologie Préhistorique, elle est porteuse d'une démarche sans cesse renouvelée sur l'évolution des gestes techniques, de l'outillage et des activités humaines, intégrant une réflexion épistémologique de fond. Elle est l'auteur de pas moins de 17 ouvrages écrits, coécrits ou dirigés, parmi lesquels on compte L'homme et l'outil, pour une archéologie du geste, ou plus récemment, Qu'est-ce que la préhistoire, question qui nous intéresse aujourd'hui. Sophie de Beaune is professor of Prehistory at the Université Jean Moulin, Lyon 3. Her past led her from Paris 1 to Paris 10, having led also to hold responsibilities as a scientific co-director of the National Institute for Humanities Research. Sophie de Beaune has been very much implied in her teaching in several French universities. Member of the research team at Ethnologie Préhistorie, she has research interests in the study of the evolution of technical gestures, tools and human activities, always with epistemological issues. She has written no less than 17 books or edited, one of the latest being entitled Qu'est-ce Prehistory. Enfin, un merci très très sincère à Jacques Pelegrin, qui a généreusement accepté d'être modérateur de la séance aujourd'hui. Il va conduire les débats après les deux interventions. My sincere thanks go to Jacques Pelegrin, who has kindly agreed to chair the debates after the talks. Directeur de recherche au CNRS, membre de l'UMR 7055, Préhistoire et Technologie, qu'il a dirigé de 2009 à 2013. Jacques Pelegrin est un mythicien au parcours foisonnant avec une carrière débutée comme médecin. Il a travaillé sur tous les continents, développant une approche à la fois méthodologique et expérimentale des techniques de taille, qu'on peut presque qualifier de symbole avec l'outil. Si ce court portrait est bien incomplet, c'est aussi dû à son humilité, l'humilité qui est la sienne. Aujourd'hui, il apportera sa vision, puisqu'ayant fait beaucoup de médiation auprès des publics jeunes et adultes, il s'est lui-même interrogé sur cette question, qu'est-ce que la préhistoire? Jacques Pelegrin is Research Director at the CNRS, where he has been directing the research unit Préhistoire and Technology. He is an eminent specialist of athletics, having had also a PhD in medicine. He has developed extensive collaborations on every continent, applying his original approach of lithic technology, which is both methodological and experimental. It can be said that he has reached a form of symbiosis with his study material. So he will bring his own views to the debate, since the question what is prehistory has been a recurring matter throughout his implication in outreach. So let me say thank you very much. Encore une fois, un merci très chaleureux à vous aussi d'être là et de participer au débat. Et je laisse tout de suite la parole à Graeme Barker. Merci.
Thank you, Emmanuelle. I must thank also Emmanuelle enormously. She has translated my PowerPoint. My French is shameful, even more shameful because I now have a French partner. So my French is unforgivably bad, as she will tell me. So I'll speak in English, but as I said, it's been translated. I saw Sophie's presentation. I was sent Sophie's presentation before, and it's a very elegant discussion about how ideas change, whether they're cumulative or not. And in fact, I was reading on the train, the latest volume of World Archaeology is on the history of archaeology, and there's a whole series of essays which are in fact really all about this theme, both what is prehistory and how do ideas change about it, what's the nature of accumulation of knowledge. When I saw that, I was thinking what I should talk about. What is that? Yeah. Oh, I see. Now it's all funding. How's it appearing?
Just press the same button.
Yeah, but the next. Oh, I see. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, I'm just in here. Right. Yeah. Anyway, what I thought I'd do in a rather indulgent way, perhaps it's a sign of being retired, was to say a little bit about my own career and how I'd engaged with the nature of the subject, and then to talk about some of the things that I, like all of us, have to confront and deal with in my present archaeology. I was the first person in my family to go to university. I went to do classics at Cambridge, largely because of people who taught me at school classics. I didn't really know archaeology, so unusually, like most students, I didn't go to university keen on archaeology. And I basically decided to change from classics to archaeology, having met Colin Renfrew at a party. And he persuaded me in half an hour that changed my life to change from classics to archaeology. And you could take an option on the Paleolithic, or you could do what was called NBI, Neolithic, Bronze Age and Iron Ages of Europe, which he taught, and by that time he left to go to Sheffield, where I was then to follow him later. Or there was Iron Age, Roman and Anglo-Saxon that were put together. So I went to university in 1965, and I changed to archaeology in 1967. And that's me, on that summer of 1967, my first excavation, an Italian Neolithic site, sitting near it, and I'm just on the left there, on the Paleolithic site, Castritza, being excavated by Eric Higgs. It was an extraordinary time to be a student, because it was really at that transition, well, in particular it was the impact of radiocarbon dating, but of course all that was part of, in a sense, the beginnings of processual archaeology, new archaeology. So we have structures which were culture history, which of course have continued today, but it was an extraordinary transformation from a world in which, before, this article came out the year I went to university, and Graham Clark took the first radiocarbon dates from the European Neolithic. So until then, until say 1960, one learnt, this is from Gordon Child's book, the idea, the dawn of civilization. And we have here the beginnings of the Neolithic in Europe at 3000 BC, and what was referred to as a chest of drawers of prehistory, because you had to link them by cross-dating and similarities. So there is the Neolithic 3000, and Neolithic Media was dated in 1962 at 6000. So the subject both exploded in terms of time periods, but of course it also therefore exploded in terms of, in prehistory, beginning to see that cultures, or however you were looking at units, didn't change altogether, but they changed at different rates. And all of that was coming out when I was a student. So none of the textbooks that were being cited were any use, because it was just changing so fast. So that was that. It was also the time when really science, through the 50s and the 60s, the impact of science on archaeology, not just dating, but environmental reconstruction, the studies of characterization and so on, typified. And I've always said to students, if you want to see how fast the subject was changing, look at the two editions of Science in Archaeology, the 1963 edition and the 1967 edition, and it's extraordinary what happened between the two. And of course, it was also that part of transformations in ways of thinking about the subject with Binford and Renfrew. I asked for that from my parents for my 21st birthday. That was my 21st birthday present, David Clark's Analytical Archaeology. So really that was the background out of which I came, or at least stepped into, without knowing the subject. 1967, I was confronted, having changed from classics into this extraordinary world. And as I said earlier, in a way that was the first thing that I'd come from a humanities background, and really seeing that prehistory was a humanities subject. We were interested in the past of people, so the goals were humanities, but we were using the methods of humanities and the methods of the sciences. The other thing was at Cambridge, as a student, an extraordinary range of people came through to give seminars. And I remember there was I doing the Neolithic of Europe with David Clarke, people like that, giving me lectures. Jack Galson came through and talked about the Cook plantation work in New Guinea. And I remember thinking then, why are we not being taught also this? These were equivalent stories to things like the linear band ceramic. And over those 2 or 3 years as an undergraduate, I mean, I got some sense of a framework, of a global past, which therefore had that sense that we are a global project. You know, it's a subject that's interested in all scales of human activity, and it's interested in all continents and in the deepest past. I went as a student, I did my PhD at Cambridge, but I spent 2 years at the British School at Rome. And my PhD was very much part of that processual world. I was attached to a project directed by my supervisor, Eric Higgs, funded by the British Academy on the early history of agriculture. That was one of a series of projects that were very much questioning the kind of orthodoxy that was developing in America and in the Near East and in other areas through those 60s. There'd been this great explosion in the late 50s and 60s, and in a way it was questioning many of those orthodoxies about why farming began and its nature. I was always on the edge of that project because I was funded separately and I was in Rome. But the PhD was published as a long article in that paleoeconomy book, and then a few years later I wrote a much rounder book about central Italy that it was. And I suppose therefore I came into that world where I mean, Eric Higgs it was simply that climate and environment are really what shape human behaviour, and I think the rest of it he simply saw as just mere sort of, I mean, human behaviour was just sort of shaped within that world. It was the extreme version. It was very much Homo economicus, so I came out of that. But I was always uneasy with that, with the Eric Higgs view of the past, in that extreme view. I suppose because of my classics background, that I had always therefore been interested in later, more complicated societies. And in the following years, in a way that was the next sense really, that of course societies were motors of change. I think it wasn't so much, I mean this was really, we weren't thinking individuals or the sort of reflexive archaeology, but I had a strong sense. I edited this book with Clive Downball, you see there, it's subsistence archaeology and social complexity, the relationship between the two. I did a lot of work on animal bones through those periods. I'd worked on animal bones for my PhD, but I ended up doing animal bone samples for friends from a series of Roman sites and medieval sites, and therefore I was engaged in text-based archaeology as well. And I had a wonderful time in the mid-1970s looking at the animal bones in Mozambique, where I went thinking I was going to be an archaeozoologist on an excavation, which I was. But I was also a member of the revolutionary brigade of the University of Eduardo Mondlane. We had 3-hour political meetings every night. But that was thinking there. You can see the article there of models in Zimbabwe. My first field project really came through that time, and it stemmed out of the kind of influences on me were, on the one hand, the debates about the impact of people on landscape and climate on landscape, and climate and people. And Claudio Vitafinzi, in fact, was my external examiner for my PhD, and he'd done this extraordinary PhD where he looked at Mediterranean valleys right around the Mediterranean, looking at why sediments formed in Mediterranean valleys and to what extent they were a feature of climate change in the past or agricultural activity. when I was in Rome, John Moore Perkins was undertaking the South Etruria survey, the last years of it, and I took part as a student a little bit. And that was an example of landscape change, settlement change through time. It was eventually published not by John Moore Perkins but by Tim Potter. So that was that, and that's a map of the Roman landscape of villas and towns and farms and so on, roads reconstructed by that project. And it was that time, the early 1970s, when I'd done my PhD, the Braudels, the Mediterranean world was translated first into English. And all of those things came together as a background, which is very much the sense of that we should be trying to write long-term history, that we had these extraordinary timescales, and the kind of thing that Braudel meant as longue durée, meaning a century or 2 centuries. Well, we got hundreds of thousands of years of that. And his conjuncture, well, he was thinking of generational change, which was difficult for us, but we could see trends and processes that were centuries. And then he had événement, and these were at different scales we could see individual events. It might be the individual potter or the individual person making a hand axe, but also we could see in this particular period, in this particular valley that we looked at, we could also see the direct impact of historical events, notably, eventually, a very brutal Roman conquest. And that led to that first project of mine, which was the Biferno Valley survey in Italy. And it also introduced me, I suppose, to when you said archaeology, prehistory consists of many different subjects. And that was really the beginning of me working with a group of other archaeologists of different periods, often with historians in these landscape studies, and in particular with geographers and related environmental sciences. And some of these people, Chris Hunt, who's an environmental archaeologist, geomorphologist, palynologist, for example, and Tim Reynolds, who's a lithic specialist and a deep prehistorian, we've worked together ever since. So we were in our 20s as graduate students when we started that project. For complicated reasons, I also ended up working on immediately pre-Roman and Roman societies, and indeed post-Roman societies, through in particular the 1980s and 1990s. And 2 main projects I was involved with, but approaching them in many ways in this kind of prehistoric and in particular this interdisciplinary landscape way. So it was the same sort of thing in some ways that we'd done in Biferno Valley. And one was a study of the communities on the edge of the Roman Empire in Libya, and what we were looking at was how they were impacted by imperialism, and also, in a sense, the relationship between the natural lives they were living. These were pastoralists primarily, and then how they were drawn into the Roman economic system, and then how the system, in fact, how many of them went back quite soon. Because basically Gaddafi wanted to know how was the desert farmed then, and could he do the same thing again today? It was a UNESCO project. And that led me eventually to another project, many of us the same, in Jordan, a study of one valley, one Wadi Fanan, which is where we have some of the earliest agriculture there, a site dug by Steve Mytham, and also some of the earliest copper mining in the world. We studied some aspects of that. And that brought me, in both instances, to seeing that in these studies where we have very rich evidence for some of these later periods, that one could see how humans do have a capacity for taking wise decisions and decisions, and sometimes in a landscape sense, those decisions had impacts on the landscape from which the landscape recovered, and sometimes they had impacts from which the landscape has never recovered. And we can see both of those things in the archaeology verification. So I think they were both of those, and working with the people studying those later historical periods, were also very influential on me. I co-directed both of the projects. And then since 2000, I've been working on, in succession, 3 caves. So going back in my career deeper and deeper into the past. So I'm absolutely the kind of academic who knows a lot about a little. No, a little about a lot, a little about a lot, not a lot about a little. And these are the 3 caves. The Half-a-Tear, which was excavated by a Cambridge archaeologist in the 1950s. Shanidar, that's McBurney. Shanidar, famous Neanderthal site, excavated by Ralph Selecki in the 50s up to 1960. And the Nia Caves in Sarawak in Borneo, excavated by Tom and Barbara Harrison. And they're all iconic Paleolithic sites. They've got deep stories. So the Half-a-Tear, McBurney put the 14-metre trench down, and it has the longest occupation sequence in North Africa. We now know, I mean, he thought back to 80,000 years, we now know it goes back 150,000 years. And he found a couple of mandibles halfway up, which he thought at the time were like Neanderthal, but he thought they couldn't be, because Neanderthals are not in North Africa, and they've since been shown to be robust Homo sapiens. Shanidar, of course, it has got archaeology in the upper layers assumed to be modern human, but nobody's found fossils. And then the famous Neanderthal burials below, including the famous flower burial that Alette Nurang very carefully argued things about flowers. And then Selecki then took her very careful arguments and made a very big story from them. And the Nia Caves, excavated by Tom and Barbara Harrison. Why that? And so yes, they at the bottom of the excavation they found modern human skull and other bones. They referred to as the deep skull. And at the time they had charcoal next to it of 40,000, and for a long time it was actually when they found it originally it was the earliest modern human anywhere in the world, with this date of 40,000 from adjacent charcoal. Since then it's now seen as, well, we now know it's about that age actually, from a direct date, but it's modern human, and the occupation in the site goes back 50,000 years. They're all sites. The Nia Caves got a sequence up to 500 years ago. Shanidar really stops at about 10,000. The Half-a-Tear goes up to 1,000 years ago in terms of the sequence. And so we've undertaken new excavations, we being many of us the same people. The Roman archaeologists who worked with in Funan stopped when I said I was going to New Guinea, Borneo. David Masson said there are no Romans in Borneo. That may not necessarily be entirely true. Stopped. So we carried out new excavations. So we worked first at the Nia Caves for a few years, and and then at the Half-a-Tear, and we re-emptied the 14-metre trench of the Half-a-Tear. We got down 10 metres in the 14-metre trench at Shanidar. The Nia Caves, again, they were left open, so we studied the sequences. They're all very small excavations, small scale, with lots of science attached to them. You can see we've dug these small trenches down the side. And they've got a lot to say about later questions, both in terms of the foraging, farming debates, transitions to farming, and in the case of the Nia Caves, they take us right up to questions of European colonialism and Indianization. But for these early periods, I mean, they've taken me into also confronting our extraordinary capacities for adaptation, for invention, for ingenuity, but also for failure. And I think we often think of the prehistoric record as a record of success. The archaeological record is a sort of assumption it's a record of success. And I'm sure that the most common thing that happened in the Pleistocene at the small scale local level were extinctions, failures. And it's just remarkable what has survived for us. Anyway, it's taken me to be involved in those sorts of questions. I hate that kind of map. That seems to me exactly what we should be trying to avoid, these maps that with big arrows. But it is an extraordinary question about why have we ended up as the successful species through this period of extraordinary, profound climate change over the last 150,000 years out of Africa. We know very little of the inside Africa. We know that we have these dates of 300,000. And even more so now, we know at a time when eventually Neanderthals disappeared, Denisovans disappeared, Homo floresiensis disappeared, possibly somewhere 60,000. And indeed, there are now arguments also of potentially or rather, the archaic Homo sapiens that we see in Africa is almost certainly going to break up into other species as well that we can see. So it just gets an enormously complicated world out of which we end up with this species. So that's been a focus. And the Near Caves have since been published as 2 large volumes, lots and lots of articles, but 75 people from around the world contributed to those 2 volumes. 75 people from 10 disciplines, I suppose. So really that's taking my own career. What are the kind of things we confront? I still find it's remarkable how the expectations of linearity and rationality still are embedded in much of what we do. This chart was produced in 1872 by Hodder Westrop, who was the man who invented the word Mesolithic. It has a series of the stages of man very definitely, barbarism, hunting, pastoral, agricultural state. There are very many similar systems presented like that as stages of the development of man, humans. And you can see there with ideas of technology and living and funerary types and environments and what they were doing and so on. And whether you look at the emergence of, as it's called, the development, they're all words that we find difficult to avoid, of complexity in Africa, the nature of expansion out of Africa, or any of these changes afterwards, the emergence of social complexity, the changes to farming, foraging to farming, the emergence of metallurgy, state formation and so on. It's extraordinary how broadly we have these assumptions of a linear direction of change. This is from a National Geographic article on Göbekli Tepe, which was trying to make the case of, well, instead of traditional ideas about agriculture coming first, then religion, that religion came first, then agriculture. But you can see it's still a question of, it's a one-way process. And this was somebody thinking of how you could categorize models, many years ago this is, of from hunting, gathering, foraging to farming, saying, well, you had these ideas of people being pushed into it, people being drawn into it, social pressures, which are equally kind of push models of different sorts. This was like with Brian Hayden feasting and so on. But they're still very much seen in those sorts of direction ways. And I've often thought that although we criticised Victorians, if a Victorian picked up many articles in Nature, they would recognise the same sort of thinking about the direction of change. And also, despite all the in our knowledge of what pre-Enlightenment Europeans and the large percentage of the world who weren't affected by, who have different sorts of worldviews, totally different sorts of worldviews that we know about. It's still extraordinary that so much of the thinking about these great changes have these expectations of a sort of rationality that we can understand. And some years ago, I wrote a book on the whole change from foraging to farming. And I had this title, "Why Did Foragers Become Farmers?" To which I ended up, I suppose, saying I didn't know, whereas it seemed quite clear when I was doing my PhD. But the kind of things that I brought out then is there is evidence for new relationships with animals and plants deep in the Pleistocene. People were moving plants around and clearing vegetation for it 50,000 years ago near caves. People were hunter-gatherers were moving animals like that couscous over long distances in the Pacific from island to island 30,000 years ago. There's pretty reasonable evidence that domestic dogs, whatever use they were a feature of Paleolithic Europe. These are pits for de-leaching, for taking out toxins from plants, which they're near cave, dated to 30,000 years ago, ash-filled pits. The same technology that Aborigines use in Australia for getting rid of toxins. It's pretty clear that there are multiple halves of domestication, and it's a word one doesn't really like, but that's pretty clear that there are many more places. And we've had so much of the study has been dominated by a small part of the Near East, particularly for political reasons. A small part of Turkey, a small part of Israel, and a small part of Jordan have dominated, and a little bit of Syria until recently have dominated most, where potentially wheat, barley, sheep and goat were from Greece to the Himalayas. So there's a great 75% of the potential area. We have no idea what was going on, but it's pretty clear there were many places where these sort of changes developed. There are combinations of foraging and farming in many places for 1,000 or 2,000 years, and that raises, we have no understanding how you do that. How do foragers, we have these ideas of how foragers think and behave and are socially integrated and how they belong to the landscape and the rest of it, and we have these other simplistic ideas about how farmers operate in terms of houses and ownership and families and land, and how do these people combine hunting, gathering, pastoralism for 1,000 years. But there are clearly societies like that. So long combinations. There are other instances where we can see societies change from being hunters and gatherers to really being quite committed agriculturalists within the space of 2 generations. We can see examples of long resistance to people who were in contact with farmers but resisted these agricultural resources for a very long time. Small elements of that Neolithic package being adopted, this partial adoption of artifacts. There's a lot of evidence for experimentation now. That Barbary sheep, those things at the top, it looks like in Libya, when it really started to get dry for a short time, there's pretty clear evidence that people tried to manage them. They were keeping them in caves with fences, and then it stopped and they went back hunting them, and eventually we get the domestic sheep and goat and so on. And there have been similar evidence being found in terms of plants in the Near East, where things we now regard as weeds were used in all sorts of different ways. So there's a lot of evidence for that sort of experimentations and things being taken on the band. And we can see societies increasingly moving backwards and forwards on this foraging, farming spectrum. And we can also see the importance in many places of the whole social ritual, the cultural values of food, that this is not simply a commonsensical process. from a deep past to the world that we understand in terms of agriculture. There's a very good article by Dorian Fuller and Elenia Suti some years ago where they re-looked at a lot of the Near Eastern sites and the PPNA sites like Geofalamar. The seeds and the sickles are all in highly ritual places, highly ritualized. So again, these must have seemed frightening, magical things, and we've never really begun to try to think about how would it have seemed from the perspective of people that side to try to understand that side. And I think all of those processes we can see, for example, in Europe. I've been working in recent, how long have I got? About 5 minutes, is that right? Are we okay? How long have I been going? Is it okay?
Yeah.
In time? All right. I've been working up in the mountains. Nia Cave is on the coast of Borneo, and we've been working up in the mountains of Sarawak in a project, this is a whole group of us, called the Cultured Rainforest Project. And up there today, there are Kelabit rice farmers who live in longhouses, the families, each separate family, families in the longhouse together. They eat rice 3 times a day. Although they're Christianized, rice is hugely wrapped up in their cosmologies. They did before Christianity, make ceremonial monuments, megalithic monuments of different sorts. They make marks on the landscape, is what they say. We are farmers, we make marks. Our ancestors were farmers, they made marks. And they move plants around. And also up there are the last few of the Penang mobile hunter-gatherers who are being deeply pressured by government to settle down and in fact become Muslim and grow rice. And the Penang, traditionally, they practiced pig hunting, a lot of other animals, but pigs in particular, and also they relied on making sago, processing sago into a plant food, and we think evidence for that at 50,000 at the Near Caves of sago making. And they're the kind of ephemeral settlements that they have. What's interesting is they both see rice as having a profound role. For the Kelabit, the good thing about rice is it separates you from the forest. For the Penang, the bad thing about rice is it separates you from the forest. And we've been working on the past of this area, and what we can see is that, in fact, down on the coast too, people seem to have come across rice probably earlier than the traditional Neolithic Austronesian model. There is evidence in the Near Caves from the isotopes of the bodies that people, whilst largely foraging, had some small-scale engagement in dietary terms with rice for about 500 years, and then it disappeared. Then it reverted back to foraging. So we have this small-scale engagement. Of course, rice may have had a hugely important role socially. It could just have been for rice wine, we don't know. But basically, people lived in a combination of what we call vegiculture, using these different plants like sago and fruit trees and so on. And rice we see coming in and out of small-scale engagement. So people knew about it. And it didn't become a food staple until approximately European colonialism, 500 years ago, associated with the beginnings of longhouse life. Sort of other things one's trying to deal with is, in particular, this is getting into the practicalities of what we do, but clearly the sense of dealing with time and space. And whereas, the maps I made in the Bifona Valley were like that, as many people would say, the past is represented in different and complicated ways in the landscape. What this is saying, in effect, is some activities in the past we're seeing now, some activities will have gone forever, some activities won't show up geomorphologically till after us. When in reality, the landscape is that palimpsest, and of course there's a lot of interest now in the past and how people living in a landscape full of their past, how they engage with that. And in particular, with these these caves present huge problems in terms of trying to understand what we deal with as prehistorians in the case of time and space. So the Halfatir has this longest occupation history in North Africa, 150,000 years. Though actually it's the longest history of probably non-occupation in 150,000 years, with brief episodes. But it is incredibly difficult to have any sort of understanding of when people were there, how often they were there, how many they were there. And it's a typical problem. We have a deep, deep stratigraphy made up of very different sorts of sediments. So we have sediments over there formed when it was very wet, so basically mud in the bottom of the cave. This is 100,000 years ago. Oscillating climates like that. In the period when it was really cold and unpleasant towards the late glacial, you can see the roof is cascading down in those sediments. That was actually the period when there seemed to be most evidence of intensive use. But intensive use means there are hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of lithics. We had in the end to make sure we just studied an area that big in terms of what we recovered because of the millions of pieces. But at the same time, many of the roots, so many of the animal bones in those deposits have got root etching, meaning the bones were lying around with vegetation growing on them because there were so few feet, so few human feet. And trying to translate any of that into not just how many people, but are they there for so many months, for 1 year? Are they there for a century? Are they there for 1,000 years? Are they? We face those typical problems that we all face, and this, for example, is the upper 2 meters of the Halfatir, where in cultural terms there's a Mesolithic occupation followed by a Neolithic occupation, truncated, and then there's a Greco-Roman building on top. It's a site that is the only site, really, apart from there's now a site actually excavated by a French PhD student just near it. But between Egypt and the west of Libya, it's the site that's always talked about for trying to understand the beginnings of the Neolithic in North Africa. So that stratigraphy is incredibly important, but actually it's fairly typical too, where some of those deposits probably took 2 or 3,000 years to accumulate, and some of them probably took 2 or 3 hours to accumulate in terms of huge floods coming in and so on. And Jeff Bailey has tried to address these problems of archaeological palimpsests and trying to understand this question of time that we have to deal with and occupations. In the site of C'lidi, the rock shelter in Greece, and you can see there it was only occupied for a few thousand years. It's a small rock shelter. They defined a few layers, these 7 successive layers. Most of the halves were in roughly the same area, and they went through an enormously detailed study. There are several chapters trying to work out in that book, 2 books actually, the nature of the occupations from the distribution of different sorts of artifacts and so on. And Galanidou, his postdoc, ends up at the end of a long discussion of all of these, basically saying, and you can see there, that she thought it might be a minimally furnished seasonal camp with low energy investment in habitational features, occasional camping. But then she also says, but you can't actually demonstrate that it's not a result of formation processes at the end of this huge exercise with very small sites. Jeff Bailey, they then wrote an article in a book on caves, in an edition of World Archaeology on caves, and they then said, well, actually perhaps we should also see that as a strength, this mixing of materials from different periods. That's if most significance to archaeological interpretation in terms of repeated use in the same place. I think I'll go straight past this, but in terms of trying to deal with any kinds of correlations and causalities, when we're trying to get into those bigger questions, again, it's incredibly difficult to try to move on from what I call storytelling which is a beloved of articles in Nature, where this happened, so this happened, and they're linked. I've always thought that's a very good example of just how incredibly difficult it is to deal with these sorts of, particularly climate people correlations. These are actually alluvial sequences in two valleys 3 kilometers apart in Greece. So it's just how the rivers were changing and what the phases are. And you can see there what the boxes are tightly dated sediments, the open boxes are more loosely dated sediments you can open. And that's the reality of the radiocarbon dates from them. And you can see the study goes on to say it's trying to discern, can we in the end make generalizations about the formation of these two Mediterranean rivers that were side by side in a typical way. But I've always thought there's a very good example of dealing with the problems of these correlations is the short article by Ames and Hodel in Nature in 2011, where they looked at the classic mire, and it's called Drought in the Mire. And there have been lots and lots of arguments about why the mire collapsed. And they just have a very, very short, very thoughtful article where they take us through the climatic evidence and the settlement evidence. And of course it's a classic example too, where you can see the environment, the climate evidence is up to, in this instance, huge distances away. And then they just take us all through the complexities of trying to show what the two different sorts of data actually show. Regional trends, changes in different social cultural changes over different parts of the mine area. One thing it isn't is anything like that. And they end up saying this, that they say the problem is that archaeologists often overlook the problems inherent in the interpretation of paleoclimate data. And this is a recent study where they were just bringing some of the paleoclimate indicators in one small part of Israel, and the last thing it is straightforward. Another example of that is the 8.2 event, which many archaeologists have seized on, and actually the paleoclimate people say the 8.2 event is extraordinarily complicated, and how it manifested itself around, for example, different parts of the Mediterranean was hugely variable. But obviously we don't read about the science behind the 8.2. We say that'll do 8.2, and then we look at our archaeology. So they're saying there that and then equally is that meanwhile the paleoclimate people are too often relying on obsolete archaeological material, and of course much of the genetic work could also be accused of that too. I'd also say from my own work that I think we can see that humans do have this capacity for having different perceptions of risk and different perceptions of opportunity, and for responding in complex ways. And I'd also say from the work I've done, I can also see that in extreme environments, clearly people do have smaller choices to make. But they end up here saying part of the problem is that researchers from both fields write and present in different venues for different audiences. We must do a better job of collaborating if we're to be considered more than just good storytellers. And Shanidar is really facing me with all of those things at the moment, because we have a long sequence of certainly 100. We're into 150,000 years now, and so we have that classic sort of evidence of climatic change, warm and dry stages at the bottom left. We have episodes of halves by modern humans, and they're dating within 3,000 or 4,000 years of each other. That's these little things here, little halves, perhaps 10, 15 people. We confronted with those problems of what do they represent. Small scale people, we think probably it's largely male, largely there for retooling and shaping tools. We have individual actions, that's an inscribed shell. And lower down we can also see what appear to be burial stacks where people are returning. This is the level of the flower burial, where what that doesn't show is actually we can see that there are 2 or 3 different burial episodes. We don't yet know how far apart they are, and there are things like placed stones. So we've got these individual small scale actions that in the end one wants to try to see, are they, is it next year, is it 100 years later, is it 1,000 years later, is it several thousand years later? The burials totally, you can see, 30,000, 40,000 years apart, the lower burials and the upper burials that Selecki found. So I say it confronted me with all of those sorts of issues and ideas that we've taken through. And I suppose finally, is in all of these projects, they've also reminded me all the time that the past is absolutely not equal. So Shanidar is all wrapped up in ideas now of what the Kurds think about themselves. The work we're doing with the Kelebit and Panan is all wrapped up in their different ideas of how they prevent their land from being logged. And again, it's not simple because in many ways the Kelebit would exploit the Panan. It's not a simple case of using the past for the future. There are complicated and not necessarily pleasant relationships between the hunter-gatherers and farmers today, and they're both looking to the past for different answers. So, thank you. We should go straight through, I don't know. I can't, whatever you want, how you want it. Up to you.
Est-ce que je passe 2-3 questions maintenant
Pour la fin.
Ça marche ça? Donc quand Emmanuelle quand on a parlé d'un exposé, j'ai trouvé que Qu'est-ce que la préhistoire, c'était un vaste sujet. Et donc j'ai décidé de traiter seulement un aspect de la question, c'est la question de la cumulativité. Pour pouvoir comparer, savoir s'il s'agit d'une science exacte ou d'une science plutôt science humaine, est-ce que nos connaissances y sont cumulatives. Donc j'ai axé le sujet là-dessus. Alors je remercie Emmanuelle qui a pris le temps de traduire mon PowerPoint pour Graeme. Et donc j'espère que ce sera compréhensible du coup.
You can go back to the French one if you want. And it's easy. Has she got the French one as well? Okay.
Voilà, donc un sujet qui a été abordé tout à l'heure un petit peu. Donc chacun se rappelle que les années 1960 ont vu l'avènement de la New Archaeology. Donc il y a déjà un rapprochement, puisqu'on en a parlé tout à l'heure, dont les tenants voulaient arracher justement l'archéologie au domaine de l'irréfutable et en faire une science au sens de Popper, c'est-à-dire formuler des hypothèses et construire des modèles explicatifs dont la validité et la pertinence puissent être vérifiées. Dans les années 1980, l'archéologie contextuelle s'est posée comme alternative à l'archéologie traditionnelle et à la New Archaeology. Elle récusait le déterminisme que la New Archaeology présupposait dans les transformations des sociétés humaines et niait la possibilité de trouver des lois générales applicables indépendamment des lieux et des époques. Mais finalement, la grande affaire dans tout ça, c'est de savoir si oui ou non on peut considérer l'archéologie préhistorique comme une science exacte Donc ce terme étant pris ici au sens popérien, c'est-à-dire s'agit-il d'une science dont les résultats peuvent être soumis à un contrôle sur le résultat duquel l'ensemble de la communauté scientifique peut s'accorder. Ce qui supposerait que les résultats s'y accumulent, comme ils le font dans les sciences exactes, où les acquis, positifs ou négatifs d'une génération, sont ceux sur quoi s'appuie la génération suivante pour les enrichir, les contredire ou les dépasser. Dans les sciences humaines, au contraire, les connaissances semblent repartir à zéro à chaque nouvelle théorie, comme si les travaux des générations précédentes étaient tenus comme nuls ou non avenus. Donc, qu'en est-il dans le domaine de la préhistoire? Alors, bien sûr, nul ne songe à nier ici que les vestiges archéologiques et les résultats d'analyse des données ne cessent de s'accumuler, au point d'atteindre aujourd'hui un volume difficile à gérer. Cela veut-il dire pour autant que la compréhension que l'on croit avoir de l'enchaînement des faits, les faits avec des guillemets, donc, a-t-il un caractère cumulatif? En d'autres termes, les constructions théoriques qui permettent d'ordonner et d'interpréter les faits constituent-elles un socle sur lequel les générations suivantes de chercheurs pourront s'appuyer pour échafauder à leur tour d'autres constructions? À partir de l'examen de deux thèmes d'études différents, demandons-nous si l'évolution des connaissances y a été cumulative. Donc ce sont d'une part l'art pariétal, l'étude de l'art pariétal, et d'autre part l'étude des capacités langagières des Néandertaliens. Alors le premier cas donc est celui des manifestations artistiques au Paléolithique. Alors bien sûr, je n'ai pas l'intention ici de reprendre en détail l'historique des études sur l'art préhistorique, et je me pencherai essentiellement sur la question de savoir ce que les connaissances actuelles doivent aux connaissances du passé, aux connaissances passées plutôt. Qu'il s'agisse de l'interprétation de l'art préhistorique comme gratuit, qui prévalut dans la seconde moitié du XIXe siècle, ou de celle fondée vers la fin du XIXe siècle sur le comparatisme ethnographique, et en particulier l'importance du totémisme dans la mentalité primitive, on sait bien qu'il ne reste aujourd'hui pas grand-chose. De même, les théories fondées sur la magie, largement soutenues par l'abbé Breuil durant la première moitié du XXe siècle, sont aujourd'hui largement dépassées. Elles se nourrissaient de toute une imagerie hétéroclite qui puisait dans la sorcellerie populaire et chez les peuples sauvages, entre guillemets, comme on disait à l'époque. Alors cette théorie n'accordait pas aux créateurs des œuvres pariétales un sens de la composition, c'est-à-dire la capacité de disposer les figures sur les parois selon un plan préétabli. Les figurations étaient considérées comme une accumulation de figures isolées. Elles étaient vues hors de leur contexte, sans juger que leur groupement en panneaux puisse être significatif. Max Raphaël fut le premier, dès 1945, à considérer les surfaces ornées comme des unités sémiotiques en relation les unes avec les autres. Son ouvrage est resté presque inconnu en France et en Espagne jusqu'à ce qu'il soit traduit en français en 1986. Entre-temps, Annette Lamine-Empereur et André Leroy-Gourand avaient, chacun de leur côté, étudié l'organisation spatiale des figurations dans les grottes ornées et montré qu'elles n'y étaient pas disposées au hasard, mais constituaient de véritables compositions. C'est dans Préhistoire de l'art occidental que Leroy-Gourand exposa sa théorie de l'art des cavernes. La distribution des thèmes figurés obéit à des règles qui définissent la nature des représentations et les associations privilégiées dans les différents secteurs de la grotte. Bon, évidemment, tous les membres de l'équipe connaissent très bien tout ça. On peut qualifier cette approche de structuraliste, même si Leroy-Gourand s'est toujours refusé à employer le mot, puisqu'elle privilégiait l'agencement, la structure des éléments dont se compose la décoration d'une grotte par rapport aux éléments eux-mêmes. Donc, vous voyez ici en bas à droite la disposition idéale d'un sanctuaire paléolithique, donc selon Leroy-Gourand, à partir de pourcentages établis avec les données de l'époque, c'est-à-dire 62 grottes et 865 sujets. Alors, la question de départ, donc, je reviens à cette question, que reste-t-il aujourd'hui de l'apport de Leroy-Gourhan? À mon avis, deux choses essentielles. Il reste tout d'abord, et on peut parler ici d'un apport négatif, qu'il a rendu certaines interprétations définitivement caduques. Et c'est indéniablement la part la plus importante de son travail. Cet apport peut être considéré comme négatif, donc avec des guillemets, au sens où son regard critique enlève plutôt qu'il n'ajoute des données. C'est ce regard critique qui permet de démonter les interprétations gratuites. C'est ce qu'il a fait dans Les religions de la Préhistoire, donc paru en 1964, et c'est indéniablement la part la plus importante de son travail. On ne peut plus aborder aujourd'hui l'étude d'un site ou d'une configuration particulière de vestiges sans avoir à l'esprit le regard critique indispensable à leur compréhension. L'analyse faite par Leroy-Gourhan de tous les phénomènes, considérés jusqu'alors comme rituels, a rendu la plupart des chercheurs très réticents aujourd'hui à formuler une hypothèse rituelle avant d'avoir épuisé toutes les autres explications possibles. On peut comparer avec Claude Lévi-Strauss, qui, à peu près à la même époque, a montré que la notion de totémisme est quelque chose de factice, d'artificiel, de fabriqué par les ethnologues, donc en particulier dans son ouvrage « Le totémisme aujourd'hui », donc paru en 1962. Alors son raisonnement revenait à montrer que ce qu'on avait appelé totémisme était une chimère que les chercheurs avaient fabriquée à partir d'éléments qui apparaissaient comme effectivement associés dans certaines sociétés, mais qui ne l'étaient pas ailleurs, c'est-à-dire que tous les traits n'étaient pas présents partout. Et du coup, le totémisme est une notion vide qui n'existe que dans les bibliothèques des savants. Il s'agit donc, comme dans le cas de Leroy-Gourhan, d'un apport négatif, en ce qu'il retranche ce que l'on croyait savoir, mais apport qui est évidemment précieux. Un second aspect, je reviens à Leroy-Gourhan, positif celui-là, c'est l'analyse structurale qu'il a conduite, donc, sur l'organisation des grottes. On peut dire quelque chose de la disposition de différents éléments entre eux, indépendamment du sens qu'on peut éventuellement, ou qu'on ne peut pas, attribuer aux figures prises en elles-mêmes. C'est là quelque chose qui restera. L'étude d'une cavité ornée passe désormais par l'analyse structurale de ces œuvres, leur nombre, leur position, leur association. Il s'agit d'une démarche que l'on ne peut plus aujourd'hui ignorer. C'est là un outil, ou mieux une attitude, que les préhistoriens peuvent en toute confiance reprendre à leur compte, quitte à en tirer des résultats qui n'auront rien à voir avec ceux auxquels Leroy-Gourhan était parvenu. Ici, il s'agit d'une démarche que l'on ne peut plus aujourd'hui ignorer, et il s'agit donc bien d'un cumul, sinon des connaissances proprement dites, du moins du point de vue méthodologique. En France, l'influence de cet aspect de l'œuvre de Leroy-Gourhan a perduré jusqu'à aujourd'hui. Même si l'on ne considère plus aujourd'hui qu'il existe un plan préconçu idéal applicable à l'ensemble des cavités, on admet que la recherche de l'organisation de l'ornementation de la grotte n'est pas une recherche vaine. Les travaux de Leroy-Gourhan ont durablement marqué des générations de préhistoriens, donc, sous cet angle-là, qui se sont attachés donc à rechercher l'organisation interne des grottes ornées en se consacrant à l'analyse technique des figurations et de leur contexte. Sans préjuger de la signification de cet art, ces études ont apporté de nombreuses connaissances directes sur les techniques artistiques de l'époque et indirectes sur la dimension régionale des sociétés du Paléolithique supérieur. Et c'est un peu à la suite des mises en garde de Leroy-Gourhan que la majorité des pariétalistes préfèrent aujourd'hui se cantonner à l'étude des techniques de réalisation de l'art et de son contexte et n'abordent pas la question de sa signification. Si une lecture minutieuse des œuvres permet de saisir les réponses ingénieuses que l'artiste a su trouver aux problèmes techniques qu'il se posait, elle apporte aussi une somme de connaissances qui permettent de comprendre, sinon la signification, du moins la place de telle ou telle représentation dans son contexte social. Alors pour être tout à fait juste, il faut rappeler quand même que les travaux de Max Raphael et de Annette Lamine-Ampère ont également contribué à poser donc, les principes méthodologiques fondamentaux de toute étude sur l'art paléolithique, qui ne peut se concevoir donc sans une analyse approfondie, interne, au document. Là encore, on peut comparer l'apport de Leroy-Gourhan à celui de Lévi-Strauss en anthropologie. Celui-ci a fait faire un pas décisif à l'analyse des récits en se limitant à l'étude des rapports entre les éléments narratifs, ce qu'il appelait la structure du mythe, et en refusant de s'aventurer dans la recherche du sens des éléments pris isolément. Leroy-Gourhan a lui aussi considéré que la relation entre les éléments importait d'abord. Mais à la différence de Lévi-Strauss, il s'est risqué ensuite à interpréter les éléments pris isolément en leur conférant une valeur, sexuelle ou autre. Mais on sait que ces spéculations sur ce point ne sont plus guère retenues aujourd'hui, et Leroy-Gourhan lui-même avait finalement reconnu qu'il ne s'agissait là que d'une hypothèse. Donc sous cet aspect interprétatif, qui est à vrai dire tout à fait secondaire dans son œuvre, l'effet de cumulativité n'a pas joué. Ailleurs, et en particulier dans les pays anglo-saxons, mais pas seulement, l'influence de Leroy-Gourhan a été moindre, pour une raison simple, c'est qu'il a été peu traduit. Mais c'est aussi, sans doute, ce qui explique qu'on y a davantage développé des tentatives d'explication de cet art relevant du magico-religieux, en recourant largement au comparatisme ethnographique. Plusieurs auteurs ont ainsi défendu, jusque dans les années 1990, la thèse du chamanisme préhistorique. On peut citer John Halifax, Demorest Davenport, Michael Joachim, Carl Schlesier, Bruce Dixon, etc. Et ce n'est sans doute pas un hasard si c'est par le biais d'un chercheur sud-africain que l'hypothèse chamanique a refait surface en France dans les années 1990, après quelques décennies d'oubli en France. On sait que David Lewis Williams a tenté, avec la complicité de Jean Clotte, de remettre au goût du jour l'hypothèse déjà formulée dès le début du XXe siècle d'un chamanisme préhistorique. Alors ces auteurs défendent une vision toute personnelle de l'art préhistorique, courageuse certes, mais indémontrable. Nous sommes donc totalement dans l'irréfutable. Peut-être qu'ils ont raison, peut-être qu'ils ont tort, mais leur thèse est ainsi conformée qu'aucune analyse ne peut trancher. Seule l'intime conviction du lecteur le peut. Cependant, alors même que la voie de l'interprétation subjective a été délibérément suivie, donc dans cette hypothèse, les auteurs tentent de donner à leur interprétation une couleur scientifique, en cherchant à rattacher les figurations à des visions obtenues au cours de la transe, qui passeraient par différents stades, eux aussi universels, mais dont le contenu varierait selon le contexte culturel. Ce sont les petits dessins que vous voyez ici. Alors, sans développer ici la critique de cette hypothèse, je pourrais en parler pendant une demi-heure, mais on n'a pas vraiment le temps, on peut dire tout simplement que son inconvénient majeur est qu'elle se heurte au fait que la transe n'est ni nécessaire ni suffisante pour caractériser le chamanisme. En admettant que les états de conscience altérés soient accessibles à tous, on ne voit pas pourquoi ils impliqueraient automatiquement des pratiques chamaniques. Et or, l'existence de stades de transe n'a été confirmée de toute façon par aucun neurologue. Alors peut-être y aurait-il matière à construire des protocoles expérimentaux qui permettraient de tester cette hypothèse neurologique. La difficulté serait alors de passer d'expérimentation neurologique, conduite en laboratoire, à des hypothèses sur l'ornementation des grottes. Cette difficulté est aussi celle que rencontre la psychologie cognitive en anthropologie. Les phénomènes sociaux, et ceux que le préhistorien étudie sont bien de ce type, ne sont pas du même ordre que des phénomènes psychologiques ou neurologiques. Des hypothèses, même établies avec rigueur sur ceux-ci, ne permettent pas d'inférer quoi que ce soit sur cela. Alors voyons maintenant le deuxième cas de figure, c'est-à-dire l'étude des capacités langagières des Néandertaliens. Alors là aussi, mon historique va se résumer à une phrase faute de temps, On sait que depuis la découverte des premiers fossiles néandertaliens, donc au milieu du 19e siècle, leur image a été largement revalorisée, entre autres grâce aux études technologiques de leur outillage qui ont révélé de réelles aptitudes cognitives. Mais malgré cela, la question de la capacité langagière des néandertaliens continue d'être débattue. On sait que deux conditions biologiques sont indispensables au langage articulé, une certaine conformation de l'appareil phonatoire et un développement minimal de l'appareil neurologique. Les résultats obtenus sur ce point sont controversés du fait que les organes de la parole sont formés de tissus mous, les muscles, la chair, et de cartilage qui évidemment ne se fossilisent. Pour savoir si les néandertaliens disposaient de l'aptitude phonatoire au langage articulé, des corrélations ont été faites entre la forme de la base de son crâne et la position du larynx, afin de retrouver la position du larynx dans le tractus vocal. Les données utilisées reposaient jusque dans les années 1990 sur des reconstitutions erronées de l'appareil vocal des néandertaliens, et les possibilités phonatoires des néandertaliens avaient donc été considérées comme inférieures à celles de l'homme moderne. Or, l'étude de l'osioïde du squelette de Kebara, en Israël, a montré que la configuration anatomique nécessaire au langage articulé était bien en place chez ce néandertalien vieux de 60 000 ans. Malgré cela, certains chercheurs, comme Jan Tattersall, affirment aujourd'hui encore que l'espace pharyngique chez le néandertalien était trop réduit pour permettre la production de sons articulés. On sait pourtant aujourd'hui que la taille et l'anatomie du conduit vocal peuvent varier et n'influent pas sur la capacité à prononcer des sons. D'autres études anatomiques, en particulier du canal hypoglosse, donc c'est le canal qui permet le passage d'un nerf innervant la plupart des muscles de la langue. Donc, des études de ce canal indiqueraient que l'aptitude au langage était acquise il y a au moins 400 000 ans. Mais ce point-là aussi est controversé, et les débats concernant ce point sont pour certains sans objet, puisque ce canal ne laisse pas uniquement passer le nerf hypoglosse, donc celui qui conduit à la langue, et du coup, comme il laisse passer d'autres nerfs, sa taille finalement ne veut rien dire. Si on regarde ce qui se passe du côté du cerveau, la présence des aires d'association auditive, donc 41, et du langage, l'aire 44 dans le cortex, donc les deux territoires du cerveau humain qui sont reliés entre eux par un faisceau nerveux qui compose le centre du langage. Là aussi, la présence de ces aires est encore en débat chez Néandertal. Ces aires ne sont pas réellement visibles, comme on peut voir sur la photo en bas à droite, puisqu'on ne peut voir que des bosses qui ne correspondent pas forcément aux zones fonctionnelles. Mais si l'absence d'un tel indice aurait indéniablement eu un caractère de preuve, négative en l'occurrence, sa présence ne constitue pas non plus une preuve, tout au plus un indice. On voit donc que les éléments anatomiques et neurologiques n'apportent pas de réponse définitive à la question de savoir si les Néandertaliens parlaient ou non. Disons qu'on peut dire que toutes les conditions nécessaires semblent remplies, ce qui n'est déjà pas négligeable. Mais, outre que l'accord des chercheurs n'est pas total, même sur ce point, les vestiges anatomiques, quels qu'ils soient, ne peuvent constituer des conditions suffisantes. Les Néandertaliens étaient sans doute capables d'émettre des sons comparables à nos consonnes et à nos voyelles, mais le langage ne se réduit pas à une émission de sons, évidemment, si complexe soit-il. Pour savoir s'ils ont utilisé leur probable capacité à émettre des sons complexes pour transmettre leurs pensées et interagir avec leurs semblables, il faut rechercher des indices d'un autre ordre, à savoir des données permettant d'évaluer leurs aptitudes cognitives. Or, les arguments d'ordre cognitif sont nécessairement indirects et se fondent sur les données archéologiques. Les activités techniques, l'expression artistique, je pense par exemple aux parures ou aux objets sommairement décorés que l'on retrouve par exemple dans le châtel péronnien, les pratiques funéraires, sont des indicateurs des capacités cognitives nécessaires à l'élaboration d'un langage complexe. Le langage complexe, j'entends du point de vue syntaxique et sémantique. Le problème reste de savoir si le mode de vie des Néandertaliens nécessitait ou non une communication d'ordre linguistique. Alors, la complexité des processus mis en jeu dans les techniques de taille du silex ou paléolithique moyen, par exemple le schéma opératoire de type Levallois, révèle des capacités intellectuelles qui sont aussi celles mises en œuvre dans le langage articulé, telles que l'aptitude à prévoir les étapes successives d'une opération, l'anticipation et la séquentialisation, l'outil étant d'abord conçu dans l'abstrait avant d'être produit par un enchaînement organisé d'actions. Cependant, les ethnologues savent qu'il n'est pas besoin de langage pour apprendre une technique, même complexe, et que l'observation et l'imitation suffisent bien souvent. En revanche, aussi fragile qu'en soit le témoignage, les œuvres à caractère artistique, esthétique, que les Néandertaliens nous ont laissées pourraient témoigner d'une communication basée sur le langage verbal. Comment aurait-il pu communiquer à propos de telles représentations sans recourir au langage parlé ? C'est encore plus vrai pour les sépultures. Elles supposent en effet que leurs auteurs aient entretenu des représentations liées à l'au-delà. Ce n'est sans doute pas un hasard si certains chercheurs, opposés à l'idée que les Néandertaliens posséderaient le langage, veulent à toute force nier la valeur probatoire des indices qui semblent attester leur capacité symbolique ou l'existence des sépultures néandertaliennes. C'est-à-dire qu'en gros, ceux qui s'opposent à l'existence du langage articulé chez les Néandertaliens s'opposent également à l'existence des sépultures chez les Néandertaliens. Alors, il faut adjoindre au débat les travaux des linguistes Jean-Marie Humbert et Christian Coupé, qui ont émis l'hypothèse que la navigation en haute mer impliquait nécessairement la possession du langage. L'un de leurs arguments est que le système de communication des premiers marins devait être assez sophistiqué pour permettre la coopération entre individus, pour la construction d'une embarcation complexe et la planification d'un long voyage. Ce qui indique que le langage articulé était connu il y a au moins 70 000 ans, avec les premiers navigateurs en Océanie, lesquels étaient des Homo sapiens. Et d'ailleurs, Humbert et Coupé ont utilisé cet argument pour dire qu'on est sûr que le langage articulé existe chez Homo sapiens, mais par contre, rien ne permet de dire que ça existait chez les Néandertaliens. Or, l'argumentation de ces chercheurs peut en fait se transposer aux Néandertaliens, et c'est ce que suggère en tout cas la découverte dans le site de Plakias, qui est sur la côte sud de la Crète, d'outils en pierre taillée vieux de 130 000 ans. La Crète est séparée du continent depuis 5 millions d'années, et même en tenant compte du fait que les eaux étaient plus basses de 100 mètres à l'époque, donc il y a 130 000 ans, et qu'on pouvait faire des escales sur d'autres îles, il fallait pour l'atteindre entreprendre une traversée de plusieurs dizaines de kilomètres, en partant soit de la Grèce continentale, soit de Turquie. Or, on sait qu'à cette époque, seuls les Néandertaliens occupaient l'Europe. Avec les sépultures et les voyages en haute mer, nous avons des témoignages qui, quoique de sorte très différente, se confortent l'un l'autre, car il en est de l'au-delà de la vie comme de l'au-delà de la mer. L'au-delà ne peut pas se montrer du doigt, et on ne peut communiquer à son sujet comme les chimpanzés communiquent entre eux à propos de ce qu'ils ont sous les yeux, seule communication qui leur soit accessible. Entreprendre un voyage vers des rivages situés à la limite de l'horizon suppose qu'on y réfléchisse, qu'on évalue l'intérêt d'une entreprise aussi risquée, qu'on la planifie et qu'on en discute avec ses semblables. Mais il est évident que le degré de plausibilité auquel nous parvenons avec de tels éléments n'est pas comparable à ce qu'atteignent les tenants des sciences exactes. Bien sûr, on reste quand même, malgré tout, dans une interprétation, même si elle nous semble plausible. Alors, bien sûr, j'ai voulu vous montrer par cet exemple le biais que j'ai utilisé pour traiter la question de la cumulativité, mais il n'est évidemment pas question ici de traiter exhaustivement la question de l'existence du langage chez les Néandertaliens. Donc j'ai juste voulu vous montrer à travers cet exemple que lorsqu'on peut trancher par des preuves archéologiques décisives, ni dans un sens ni dans l'autre, les arguments périphériques vont s'accumuler. Tant qu'il s'agit de savoir si l'anatomie des Néandertaliens les dotait de l'aptitude à parler, on est dans le registre des sciences naturelles. Ce qui ne veut d'ailleurs pas dire que les questions posées sont de celles auxquelles on va répondre par oui ou par non. Par exemple, où situer le seuil à partir duquel le canal hypoglosse sera jugé assez large et donc la langue assez mobile pour que le langage soit techniquement possible. Vous voyez que là, on ne répond pas par oui ou par non. Et de toute façon, lorsqu'il s'agit de savoir si les Néandertaliens ont effectivement utilisé leurs éventuelles aptitudes langagières, on sort des limites des sciences exactes. Les opinions se divisent sur cette question et les hypothèses font d'ailleurs intervenir des présupposés qui sont parfois d'ordre extra-scientifique. On est donc là encore dans un domaine très subjectif où des arguments de l'ordre de la croyance s'opposent. La passion n'est d'ailleurs pas absente du débat, tant chez les chercheurs qui côtoient quotidiennement les Néandertaliens et en étudient donc les productions techniques, qui cherchent à les défendre et à réhabiliter leur image, que chez leurs adversaires. Ce ne sont pas les connaissances qui s'accumulent, mais les arguments des uns et des autres, aussi indémontrables qu'inconciliables. Alors j'en viens à ma conclusion. On voit donc que finalement, dans ces deux thèmes, les connaissances ne s'accumulent pas de la même manière que dans les sciences naturelles. Et il en aurait été de même si nous avions considéré un autre domaine comme celui de l'étude des objets techniques. On pourrait penser, a priori, que plus l'objet est technique, matériel, plus les études le concernant sont assises sur du solide. Mais dès que l'on aborde la dimension sociale ou culturelle de ces objets, on retombe dans les mêmes errements que pour l'étude d'événements moins tangibles. Alors, on sait que Jean-Claude Passeron rappelait que la sociologie ne pouvait pas être une science expérimentale à la manière de la physique, puisque si le physicien peut répéter une expérience, le sociologue observe des configurations jamais réitérées dans le cours de l'histoire ou dans l'espace des civilisations. Donc là, je le cite. C'est en ce sens qu'il considérait la sociologie comme une science historique, c'est-à-dire une science dont l'objet est pris dans le flux irréversible du temps. Et c'est dans ce même sens que la préhistoire se range dans la catégorie des sciences dites historiques, c'est-à-dire comme une science humaine, les humanities, comme on dit en anglais. Malgré ce constat, il faut reconnaître que, à l'exception de quelques rares cas de régression, je pense en particulier à l'épisode du chamanisme, la science préhistorique progresse, ne serait-ce que parce qu'elle a su réfuter et juger insuffisants des travaux produits par le passé. Un étudiant qui souhaiterait soutenir aujourd'hui un travail de préhistoire à la manière de Breuil ou de Salomon Reynard ne serait sans doute pas admis à soutenir sa thèse. Ce qui prouve bien que des assertions ont été réfutées et que des procédés d'analyse ont été invalidés, même si la réfutation et l'invalidation n'ont pas toujours été explicités. On peut finalement conclure de tout ce qui précède que la préhistoire comme l'anthropologie sont bien des sciences, l'anthropologie sociale j'entends, sont bien des sciences réfutables, mais pas au sens popérien du terme. Dans les sciences dites exactes, la réfutabilité est assurée par l'expérimentation. L'expérience de Michelson et Morley a rendu définitivement inutile le recours à la notion d'éther et on ne reviendra jamais là-dessus. Dans les sciences humaines, une certaine forme de réfutation est parfois possible au moyen de la comparaison. C'est par la comparaison entre les données recueillies dans diverses sociétés que Lévi-Strauss a montré que la notion de totémisme était infondée. L'expérimentation n'est du reste qu'une forme particulière de comparaison. Le préhistorien passe son temps à comparer ces données à d'autres, déjà connues et modélisées, pour en rendre compte au mieux. Ce qui fait dire à Georges Guillet-Escuret, donc qui est anthropologue, que la science, même humaine, est alors je le cite, est un démenti permanent. Elle n'amoncelle pas du progrès positif, elle accumule des dénégations. Son progrès véritable consiste en un rétrécissement de l'éventail des possibles. Gérard Lanclus s'est lui aussi interrogé sur ce qu'il en est de la cumulativité en anthropologie. Les faits ethnographiques résultent d'un tri opéré par l'ethnographe. Ce sont des données construites, comme le sont les données archéologiques. Mais ces données sont trop hétérogènes pour être comparables dans le temps et dans l'espace. Elles s'accumulent, certes, comme le font les vestiges et les résultats d'analyse en préhistoire, mais leur élaboration n'est pas cumulative. L'activité de l'anthropologie, qui consiste en la construction de théories en ismes, fonctionnalisme, culturalisme, évolutionnisme, etc., n'est pas plus cumulative, dans la mesure où ces théories générales ne font finalement que proposer des perspectives d'études différentes et pas nécessairement inconciliables donc sur la réalité. En revanche, donc là je reprends l'idée développée par Gérard Lanclus, il peut exister des micro-théories de la société à l'étape intermédiaire de la synthèse ethnologique, donc consacrée à des objets de recherche régionaux, thématiquement et géographiquement. Et à cette échelle intermédiaire, on peut détecter de petites zones de cumulation. En d'autres termes, des descriptions bien conduites de cas particuliers peuvent servir de modèle à d'autres descriptions. Et il me semble que l'on peut dire peu ou prou la même chose de la préhistoire. Voilà, je vous remercie de votre attention.
Ça va être le tour des questions, chers collègues. Nous avons 2 présentations au remarquable. Si vous avez des questions. Françoise?
Do you think it would have been legitimate for Lewis Williams? Was it legitimate for Lewis Williams to? I think there's one question. Was it legitimate for Lewis Williams to take the ideas of shamanism that he observed in historically recorded societies in South Africa, the relationship between the rock art and the societies that he looked at in terms of the last 200 years? Do you think it was legitimate of him to have taken those concepts and applied them, however, sensitively to South African, to the prehistoric rock art in South Africa, as opposed to Chauvet?
Je réponds en français.
Oui.
Alors David Lewis Williams a effectivement pris le modèle de certaines sociétés San qui pratiquaient le chamanisme, mais il y a des chercheurs sud-africains qui ont critiqué ça parce qu'il a comparé, il a appliqué cette hypothèse à des sociétés qui effectivement pratiquent le chamanisme, mais qui ne sont pas les auteurs des peintures, qui vivent à plusieurs centaines de kilomètres des peintures interprétées comme étant des peintures chamaniques. Donc ça veut dire que même si on prend sa comparaison sur place, elle n'est pas valide, puisque d'une part, les sociétés en question ne sont pas les auteurs des œuvres, et d'autre part, il n'y a qu'une infime partie des figurations qui peuvent être interprétées comme d'ordre chamanique. Et les 80% des figurations sont des scènes de la vie quotidienne, en fait. Donc du coup, les chercheurs sud-africains eux-mêmes ont critiqué l'hypothèse de Lewis Williams sur place, en Afrique du Sud. Parce qu'après, on sait qu'il a essayé de transférer donc, cette hypothèse qu'il a considérée comme étant solide en Afrique du Sud, il a essayé de la transférer
en France.
Donc déjà, elle était fragile au départ. Alors je ne dis pas que le chamanisme n'a pas existé, je dis que rien pour l'instant ne permet de le confirmer, de le prouver.
Si je me souviens bien, on disait qu'une fois qu'on avait dit que c'était chamanique, on n'avait rien dit parce que
oui, en plus c'est une notion extrêmement vague.
Toutes les sociétés de chasseurs sont peu ou prou chamaniques.
Oui, c'est une notion très très vague. C'est même pas une religion d'ailleurs, c'est une pratique thérapeutique le chamanisme. ça n'apporte pas grand-chose de dire qu'ils étaient peut-être pratiquaient du chamanisme.
Isn't it true that many scientists also say that science developed cumulatively? That some scientists would say that actually you can see the same leaps and resistances, and it's related to the context of the scientists, the authority of leading figures and so on.
Yes, you're right. Oui, c'est vrai, là j'ai un peu schématisé, mais c'est vrai. En sciences exactes aussi, il y a des tâtonnements, il y a une part d'intuition énorme aussi. Mais après, quand même, il faut pouvoir, en physique par exemple, il faut pouvoir créer des expériences que l'on peut réitérer à l'infini, quand même. Mais c'est vrai que souvent aussi, il peut y avoir des hypothèses dont on a en mathématiques la solution d'une manière intuitive. Mais après, justement, la difficulté, c'est d'arriver à la démontrer. Mais oui, c'est pas si simple non plus.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I think we would like to know what you think about, let's say, the structure about from Sophie's presentation.
I agree with how the two examples that she took is exactly so. Where you ended up, your final slide was these well-constructed depictions of specific cases. Is that right? The final slide that she had said, when you said, well, and that's more or less, oui, des descriptions bien conduites de cas particuliers, that they can be. Didn't anthropology, certainly British anthropology, reached a crisis when anthropologists felt that you couldn't generalise, that I can know about my society and you can know about your society, and I can tell you the richness of my society, but certainly Britain, there was a period of a kind of retreat from generalisation. It was a real crisis for anthropology in terms of their public validity. And then I wasn't quite sure where you were going at the end, having said, yes, we can end up, as we try to do, with well-constructed depictions of specific cases. But I wasn't sure where Sophie felt one would go from there. As soon as we try to move into large-scale generalisation, of course, we're completely vulnerable to critique. But as I say, anthropology certainly got into a phase where we would say it got itself into a corner of an unwillingness to generalise. That's British anthropologists. But certainly, I would agree that certainly how knowledge has accumulated, and as you say, the whole business of testability and proof and so on, as people have said, in the sciences it's seen as a very specific aspect, because you have the laboratory experiments and you have the observations of the world, and they would say that is that's a relationship of genuine testing. And of course many people for 50 years have said in archaeology, can we actually do that? There are some specific narrow cases, I suppose, in some experimental archaeology where we can talk of that process of a genuine testability, but in 95% of what we do, clearly we can't. We're taking observations of a present day world, which is clearly, we know that is not a past world, but we have no Neanderthals to ask. All we can do is we can make those sorts of science observations you talked about, like the hyoid and so on. And then we take these general ideas about the nature of present-day hunter-gatherers, which we clearly know, they're our laboratory, of course, they don't have the same status. And you say we end up with degrees of implausibility and so on. So it is a human science, as you say.
But you agree with this with these degrees of plausibility?
Yes, I mean, you said at the end, it's quite interesting, when you said actually for PhD students said, yes, I want to do it like so-and-so did it, we would say no. So we do have some sense of things that are appropriate and not appropriate. If you take those, I mean, I'm not sure you could point to the same. I was thinking while she was talking when I read it, could you take another example, the way thinking has developed about the beginnings of farming? I'm not sure you could. It just seems far too, the way people's ideas have developed and the contributions of science and things that are refutable and irrefutable. I'm not sure we could show how ideas have got more and more complicated. But I'm not sure we could show it in the same sort of way with the two examples you took.
D'autres questions? Je voulais juste faire la remarque concernant l'intervention de Sophie de Beaune, que j'ai l'impression qu'il y a deux choses à distinguer. C'est la production du savoir et la validation du savoir. J'ai l'impression que jusqu'à présent on a fait mélanger les deux. Et quand on parle de cumulativité, quand on parle de réfutabilité...
J'ai bien entendu, je ne remets pas en question le fait qu'on a de plus en plus de données archéologiques, de plus en plus d'analyses, de résultats d'analyses, etc. Bien sûr.
Mais ça, c'est
évident.
Et donc, ça commence
beaucoup plus solide.
Ouais,
on a un ensemble de faits, d'observations primaires et secondaires aussi quand même.
C'est ça. Non,
qui est énorme.
Je suis un peu... bien sûr, c'est un peu provocant.
Non,
mais c'est vrai qu'il ne faut pas oublier que même dans le choix, il y a, même dans on fouille, on choisit. Il y a un choix, il y a un tri qui s'opère très tôt.
Quand je parle de savoir, je ne parle pas je parle d'explication, d'interprétation, que l'on fait parfois sur le terrain, parfois après, et la manière de produire ces explications. Elle n'est pas toujours hypothético-déductive, elle peut être inductive aussi, elle a aussi une valeur scientifique qui est fondée sur un autre type de raisonnement. Ce dont on a parlé maintenant, là, c'est l'histoire de la question de la validation dans un modèle hypothético-déductif. La question pérenne de la réfutabilité.
Oui,
mais la
sûr.
préhistoire, c'est aussi une discipline
la question
inductive.
de la cumulativité, qui est un des chapitres de mon livre, Qu'est-ce que la préhistoire, il y a effectivement un chapitre sur les raisonnements en archéologie, type effectivement hypothético-déductif, etc. Bien sûr. Je suis d'accord que ça ne tombe pas du ciel.
Non,
bien sûr, c'est le résultat d'un raisonnement.
Non, ma question, c'est tout simplement, est-ce qu'on n'oublie pas toute une partie de la manière dont on produit de la connaissance en préhistoire et qui ne passe pas du tout par ces biais-là, qui passe par des processus inductifs. Et comment, ma question, tout simplement, c'est comment les faire entrer dans cette question de cumulativité.
speaks very well English.
Use English. Now, my question is, how do we treat the inductive dimension of archaeology? How we deal with the inductive dimension of archaeological practices with that framework, with the framework of refutability and of cumulativity. I don't know how we can make it work. So that's why I'm asking the question, because I'm afraid we are just focusing on one very specific and narrow aspect of archaeological practices, and not about archaeology as a whole complex discipline.
But isn't inductive process intuitively inside a framework, theoretical framework, and then we are back to the hypothetico-deductive. Because you say induction, yes, but it doesn't come from nowhere. And so it means that behind you have a framework, intellectual framework, an hypothesis.
Yes, no. Most of us, well, I mean, explanation in archaeology clearly individual archaeologists will, I think, vary across that. They move across that spectrum perfectly comfortably. It's the nature of the subject, and much of what we're often doing is pattern recognition. And we know, and we can't do better than that. As I said, it becomes really difficult when you're trying to take one set of patterns and another set of patterns and turn them into some kind of relationships. We know it's a large amount of circular reasoning, but as I think much archaeological endeavour does move across those inductively perfectly easily with the nature of the subject.
En tout cas, pour répondre à ce que vous disiez sur les raisonnements hypothético-déductifs, bien sûr, on utilise ces raisonnements-là, mais ça ne donne pas une réponse sûre à 100%. Si on reprend l'exemple du canal hypoglosse, eh bien, comme j'ai un canal hypoglosse de telle taille, je peux en déduire que mon air hypoglosse pouvait passer par là et qu'il avait assez de largeur pour, mais ça ne m'autorise pas à conclure pour autant que l'homme avait la capacité langagière. Vous voyez ce que je veux dire? Bien sûr que c'est ce type de raisonnement qu'on utilise, mais ça ne donne pas une solution clé en main, malheureusement, c'est dommage d'ailleurs, ce serait plus simple. Ça permet de proposer des hypothèses plus ou moins vraisemblables, avec un degré de plausibilité le plus élevé possible. Alors on ayant recours à ce type d'arguments, mais ce sera toujours des hypothèses. Malheureusement.
Yeah, if you take that big debate about the nature of Neanderthal societies, why did they die out, and are there aspects to do with their ability to communicate, their mental constructs, and all of that, and we're dealing with these Neanderthals on the edge of their occupied world in the mountains of Iraq at Shanidar. Are they very isolated populations? Do you end up with very small groups without these means? I mean, we've invented, well, we haven't invented, we have these ideas about how modern humans used culture to connect each other up across widely scattered populations in an Ice Age environment. And we have contrasting ideas about to what extent Neanderthals had those sorts of social, cultural, cognitive structures to be competitive in an Ice Age environment. At the moment, there are, Eske Willerslev is trying to get DNA out of 2 Neanderthal bones. When I showed that picture of the lower burials where the flower burial is, we can see at least 3 cuts, and we think the micromorphology is showing, in terms of the refutable and non-refutable, that these are not cuts made by water, these are cuts made by people. That they are bodies in troughs that were cut, and there are stones that cannot be explained in any sort of geomorphological terms that are placed. So we have these burial events like that, and he's trying to get DNA out of 2, what we see are 2 skeletons who are separated. Now how far apart we don't know, but they're in that order of roughly the same. And clearly if that specific piece of science, if it shows that there is or is not evidence of interbreeding between 2 Neanderthals from the same place at the same sort of period of time, again you can see that that's a very specific piece of science, a bit like your Hyoid things that will contribute to those wider debates. But it won't solve those questions the way a geneticist like Eske Willerslev thinks it will solve the questions, and meanwhile we're using those other sorts of human sciences to all the rest of the kind of data we're using. And it's fairly typical. We have sort of inferences from the nature of the amount, the distances they're moving materials and so on and so forth. So we have a set of archaeological constructs about the nature, we're building up those societies, and something like that, a very specific piece of science. And we value both of them as archaeologists, as we're teaching him to value both of them. geneticists.
Si je peux rajouter, if I can add something which is a little bit more personal, due to my experience with presentation with children and with public too. Well, prehistory can well be a science, but it is also a discourse somehow. So it goes to storytelling. But a storytelling which is not closed and que j'appelle réflexion. I like it very much because it lets people think. And I even met people that disliked, that were very really irritated if you pretended that you would know such or such aspect. I mean, if you are too precise, even concerning the dates, chronological dates and so on. But how can you know that? I mean, we don't know that. It cannot be that precise. And then you have to explain that that's right. We don't know, but it might be. And in many cases, it's enough. People like to know a little bit about methodology. How do you know that? About the environment, for instance. They like to know the source of information that you mention to them, as much as the result itself. But they also like that problems keep open, and because then you can reflect about them.
And certainly we are part of. I mean, it's clear. It's very clear for us. I mean, the nature of knowledge in our post-Enlightenment Western world, and the nature of inquiry about the past, and other people's views about the past, and I mean that is. I mean, it affects prehistory most of all, I suppose, but it affects archaeology generally, doesn't it? Particularly when you're doing archaeology in places where societies, I mean, although they're now, I mean, they're 21st societies, part of the global world, but nevertheless, I mean, like these Kelabit, these Banan, they clearly think about themselves, their place in the world, and their past in completely different sorts of ways. And they're neither better nor worse, that they are different. And for many archaeologists, it rather comes like that with your children, the views of the world. I mean, it's the business between scholarly knowledge. Do we have control of that? Should we have control of that compared to other ways of thinking about this information that we're producing? Which is rather like your children having different. I mean, and clearly we all debate about that. About the proper scientific process that we've created in our endeavours to try and find out about the past, and the kind of ways that, say, other sorts of societies think about the past and knowledge, and there's a tension nowadays, and for many of us, between those. I mean, there was a time when as Ian Hodder left Cambridge, he got to the extreme end of that sort of idea that anybody's stories about the past are just as valid as any academics. And I had to examine, as I arrived in Cambridge, a master's thesis by somebody who had heard Ian Hodder and believed it totally. And he presented his master's thesis, and at the beginning he said, I was going to write a thesis about the role of Mithraism on the Roman frontier. Indeed, I have written that thesis, but I've decided not to submit it. Instead, and we then had a chapter where he said, here comes Ian Hodder's view of different narratives of the past, they all have equal validity. And therefore, instead of giving you my thesis, I'm giving you 3 short stories. So chapter 2 it was a dark and stormy night, and Hadrianus, somebody, approached the temple. and then there was this next chapter which was another kind, and there were these three stories. And you could see that underneath them were three contrasting ideas about this role of native religion. There was theory 1, theory 2, theory 3, but he turned them into these three stories. So as I arrived in Cambridge, somebody had given this naught, and I think Ian from Stanford had given it 90% or something like that. And so that it's an extreme view, but we all have to, so certainly working in these other parts of the world, and there are many archaeologists in those sorts of positions where there are clearly very different ways of thinking about the past, and the answer is no longer simply, if you like, there's a scholarly way.
Une dernière question. Oui, Françoise.
You say page succeed, adapt and succeed or fail. The problem is often failing people disappear.
Well, but do they? We assume that the archaeological record, all these lithics and stones and bits of pottery and bits of animals, we assume that they're part of the successful. But much of that deep past must also be records of failures. So we have this cumulative archaeological record, but it isn't necessarily this record of success. In fact, we can see where we have more and more complicated, rich archaeologies in prehistory, we can see all sorts of trajectories together. You can see those in the Near East, where in terms of particular context of climate change, we can see that different societies had different perceptions and took different pathways, one of which we recognise 5,000 years later as agriculture, and the others didn't. So I think the other thing I think we haven't mentioned here probably is also that in terms of those periods like the Neolithic, the big revolution in radiocarbon dates now is such that there is an opportunity for the next generation to grasp scales of chronology that we never could, to write something that is a prehistory. I mean, there are cases here, but the kind of work that's gone on in Britain now, where people can say that megalithic monument was being built in the same 20 years that on the other side of the hill that prehistoric monument was being abandoned, where they're dealing with timescales which are now at the generation 25, 30, 50 years, where the really rich radiocarbon is. And that's again releasing archaeologists, I think, to confront questions about stability, change, natures of societies, decision making, and so on, in as revolutionary a way as it was for me as an undergraduate coming in at the beginning of that process. For prehistorians to be able to talk about the 6th millennium, the 5th millennium, the 4th millennium, the 3rd millennium at generational level, which is clearly what's going to happen in the next 10 years in certain parts of Europe, that's an enormous release from constraints that we've had before.
Merci. Alors, la semaine prochaine, le séminaire sera à Cambridge avec Fanny Beauquentin, et rendez-vous à Nanterre est pris pour le 14 décembre avec Frédéric Valentin. Et dans l'immédiat, ceux qui doivent aller à leur évaluation HCERES, bon courage. Les autres, vous êtes bienvenus pour un nouveau cours. Encore merci aux intervenants.